Well, Judge Leifman, you're not a doctor, but I say that you told me that you probably see more patients with mental health and drug abuse or drug overuse than many doctors, shall we say, in your courts. And certainly that you have really been very active in thinking about where we should go in the future, particularly in the issue of criminal justice system, what's the role, what's the right way to calibrate it, and can you say a word about how you see this?
Thank you very much for being here. And when I was first invited, it was true. I was thinking it's kind of odd for a judge to be presenting in this forum. But the reality is that I see more people in a day with serious mental illness and substance use addiction than most doctors see in a month. When I became a judge, I had no idea I was actually becoming the gatekeeper to Florida's largest psychiatric facility and Florida's largest warehouse for people with substance addiction. While the United States has 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of the world's inmates. As we sit here this afternoon, think about this. 1 out of 104 adults are in jail. 1 out of 33 adults in the United States are under correctional supervision. Since 1980, the number of people going to jail in the United States has tripled, and their sentences have increased by 166%. The war on drugs, the war on crime, the institutionalization, no funding. But the reality is when you peel back that onion, what you will find is most of this is due to untreated mental illness and untreated substance use addictions. In fact, people with mental illnesses and co-occurring disorders are 9 times more likely to be incarcerated than hospitalized. They are 18 times more likely to find a bed in jail than any state civil hospital. Annually, we have about 2 million people with serious mental illnesses arrested. 40% of all people with serious mental illnesses at some point in their life will come into contact with the criminal justice system, and almost all of them have a co-occurring disorder. 33% of all women in jail and prisons in the United States have a serious mental illness, and 14% of all men. 65% of all inmates in jails and prisons in the United States have a diagnosable substance addiction, and 85% meet criteria for substance abuse. Last year alone, the highest number of arrests were for not drug-related, for drug offenses. 1.5 million arrests were drug offenses, and 85%, just over 1 million, were for actual drug possession. And that doesn't include all the other crimes that are drug-related, like theft and burglaries and assaults and the act of someone's addiction. Financially, it's even worse. Last year, our counties combined spent over $80 billion for correctional costs. It's gotten so bad that counties are making decisions now. Do I build a new hospital or a new jail? Do I build a new road or highway or a new jail? Do I build a new school or do I build a new jail? And while the doctor pointed out that there were about 2 million people associated with prescription pain medication and 600,000 with heroin, that's really a drop in the bucket compared to the addiction numbers. There are more people in the United States with substance use disorders than cancer. Almost 21 million people in the United States are living with substance use disorders. And we're spending about $78 billion on opiates, but it's $420 billion a year for healthcare costs, lost economic productivity, and criminal justice costs for all of substance use. And so while focus on the opiates is very important, what we really have in this country is an addiction epidemic, not just an opiate epidemic. In fact, people just don't use opiates. People addicted to alcohol are 2 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. People addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. People addicted to cocaine are 15 times more likely to also be addicted to heroin. And so when you start to look at the causes, and it's been touched upon here all day, the biggest problem that we see is that we have applied a criminal justice model to an illness. And I don't know why anybody should be surprised that it's failed. Think about it. We have lawyers and police basically in charge of our mental health and substance use addiction problem. I mean, it shouldn't be a shock. You know, they have these great ads, Cancer Centers for America, and they're beautiful, and they're like, God forbid you get cancer. You know, we're going to take care of every aspect of your illness, your mental health, your housing, your pain. You know, you're like, wow, cancer may not be so bad. But for people with mental health and substance use addiction, the system could not be any further from the truth. It's a horrible system. I have 58 providers in Miami-Dade County that provide mental health and substance use treatment in the public system. We found out a couple years ago they were using 58 different assessment tools, giving 58 different diagnoses, 58 different medications, 58 different case managers, meaning we're spending billions of dollars and getting nothing in return. I don't know why we're not angrier about this. If we treated people with primary health care the way we treated people with mental illness and substance use, not only would there be a plethora of civil lawsuits, there'd be criminal indictments for gross negligence. What other illness do we discharge people in the middle of the night? We don't give them what they need, and then we arrest them when they don't behave the way society needs them to behave. It's outrageous. And we, first responders, police, EMTs, the courts, it is overwhelming for us at this point. I mean, some of the reasons for this are pretty obvious to us, and I don't know why it's not more obvious for other people. I mean, aside from treating it as a crime and not a disease, you look, for instance, my EMTs last year in Miami-Dade dispensed 4,300 Narcans. Half of those people that they revived got up and walked away. They either found them dead a little while later, or they were chasing where the last person died so they could find the stronger fix and get the better high. The other half that they revived but had to take to a hospital, once they got them revived at the hospital, they then got up and they walked away without any tracking, without any assistance, without any referral for treatment. I don't know why we're surprised it's failing. Trauma is a huge problem. We're not going back early enough and figuring out why people have so much anxiety and why people are so traumatized that they're turning to some of these substance addictions. This is one of the worst statistics I've learned in my business. 92% of all the women in jail and prison in the United States with a serious mental illness were sexually abused as children. And it's familiar, and they just have the worst PTSD, and there's no identification in the school system for any of these traumas. There's no offer of treatment. They just get put in a class with a bunch of other bad kids. They turn to drugs. They continue to recycle through the adult criminal justice system their entire lives when they're victims. 75% of men who are in jail and prisons with serious mental illness also have serious trauma issues. Again, nobody is doing anything to identify it, track it, or help them move from it. I mean, we don't even help identify high-risk jobs that are getting exposed to serious trauma. Our police officers get 6 to 9 times more cortisol a day than people outside of law enforcement. It explains why they have some of the highest suicide, substance abuse, some of the highest divorce rates, and domestic violence rates of any profession. We have over 5,600 police officers trained in Miami-Dade County in a program called Crisis Intervention Team Policing. It teaches law enforcement how to identify, how to de-escalate, and where to take people with mental illness and substance abuse as opposed to arresting them. The officers have become heroes, but what we found out is they are suffering as bad as anybody. The woman that teaches my program, who's a licensed therapist, gets 150 calls a month from police officers for their own personal mental health issues. We have really gone about this all wrong. And I'm hopeful that during the questions we'll get an opportunity to talk about the solutions, because there are many there. They're structural changes, they're not necessarily medical, but just helping get rid of the fragmentation in this crazy system of ours and helping people access treatment makes a huge difference. Thank you. You have to sit down. You're only allowed to stand when I walk in. So.
You want change? There are a lot of people ready for change.